Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here so early today. I appreciate it's 9 a.m. on a Saturday and we've all got places we'd rather be. But I'm glad you're here with us, and welcome to our little symposium, Dead Media, Contemporary Horror and the Analogue. For those of you who we haven't met yet, I'm Laura, hello, and this is Shelley.
Hello.
Hello, and we co-convened the BAFTSS Horror Studies Subject Interest Group. So in the SIG, we organise a lot of regular horror studies events, from panel discussions and book launches to symposiums like this one. And we put out a horror studies bulletin with news about publications and events. And generally, we kind of aim to provide a space for a community of horror scholars at all levels. So if you didn't know us before, we hope today's a good intro to us, and we hope that you keep in touch. As well as working on the SIG together, Shelley and I have found that our research interests have kind of intersected in recent years, which has been lovely. So today's event has kind of sprung from a project which we started about 3 years ago, before realising that this kind of reappropriation of analogue formats and styles within the contemporary horror genre was a growing area of interest for lots of other horror scholars too. So when we started, we decided to use the term dead media. And it's kind of stuck, even though we didn't plan on that happening. But we use dead media to kind of evoke the themes of death and haunting at the heart of horror. But it's also indebted to media archaeology, and especially to Bruce Sterling's Dead Media Project, which was an archive of obsolete technologies that was initiated in the 1990s as digital formats began to take off and take over from analogue. Now, horror, of course, is always engaged with threats of new technology and cursed media. But we're much more interested in how largely obsolete media objects and aesthetics now function within the horror genre, and how new horror stories use analogue objects to explore the malevolent possibilities of dead media in the digital age, or how they utilise analogue aesthetics such as glitches and static.
So although our initial ideas and our initial work around analogue horror focused very much on film and television, we wanted this symposium to bring together work on how the idea of dead media has taken up residence in varied formats and forms. So as you can see by the papers that are coming up today, we have speakers presenting on all kinds of formats and forms, so music, podcasts, and video games, for example. And it's our aim that today functions as a first step towards creating a network of scholars and researchers working in the area. So overall, it's our hope that this is the start of building future collaborations.
Okay, I think we'll get started. So our first chair this morning is Kieran. Good morning.
Good morning.
So Kieran Foster is our first chair this morning, and we'll hand over to him. Hopefully all our speakers are here for our first panel. So hand over to you, Kieran. Thanks, mate.
Perfect. Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Shelley. Very, very excited and happy to be here and helping kick off this very, very exciting conference. Without further ado, let's get started. To introduce Stella, who we just saw there, Dr. Stella Gaynor. Is Senior Lecturer in Media, Culture and Communications at Liverpool John Moores University. She's the author of Rethinking Horror in the New Economies of Television, and has published works exploring the global spread of The Walking Dead, satire in Black Summer, and faith and zombie narratives. Her current project, Murder Media, has works published exploring nostalgia for the captured killer and conversations with a killer, the Ted Bundy tapes, inverting the true crime narratives via the female perspectives. In Falling for a Killer and Murder Mystery and Makeup, and a forthcoming article on true crime podcasts and their associated social medias. Now, this is, it's called It's a Shitty Piece of Plastic That Doesn't Even Record, Communicating with the Dead on YouTube with Glam Gore. So I will now hand over to Stella. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kieran. All right, good morning, folks. And first of all, thanks to Laura and Shelley for organising this event. As well, I'm also still coughing and recovering from COVID, so I apologise for any and all gross noises that I make during this paper. I also wrote this paper while I had a fever with COVID, so if it makes no sense, then that's why. So let's jump into it then. So as Kieran has said, it's a shitty piece of plastic that doesn't even record, communicating with the dead on YouTube with Glam Gore. So which dead are we communicating with? On August the 4th, 1894, Abby Borden was found murdered, having been hit 19 times with an axe. Her husband, Andrew Borden, was also murdered with the same axe, with just the one blow this time to his face, completely splitting his skull in two. The axe was left buried in his skull. The case remains unsolved as the main suspect, Lizzie Borden, Andrew Borden's daughter, was acquitted. So I've not got the time to go into the ins and outs of everything that happened, but in brief, Lizzie and Emma Borden were born to Sarah and Andrew Borden. Sarah died of natural causes and Andrew remarried to Abby. John Moores was Lizzie and Emma's uncle, brother to the dead by natural causes Sarah. Lizzie and Emma did not like their stepmother Abby, but it was thought by many that she married Andrew Borden for his money. At the time of the murders, only Lizzie and the maid, Bridget, were in the house. Emma Borden, Lizzie's sister, was away, and John Moores, who was close to the family, was also away that day. It was at the house before the axe murderers and the day after the axe murderers, but the day that it happened, he was away, apparently. So all circumstantial evidence pointed to Lizzie Borden. At the trial, she was acquitted as a woman couldn't possibly commit such a bloody crime, and it remains unsolved. So the house where the murders took place in Fall River, Massachusetts, is now, of course, a bed and breakfast, because why wouldn't it be? And it's all set up and decorated to make it look like it did in 1892. And it's at this B&B that we find our YouTube channel host, Mikey, of the Glam Gore YouTube channel, and this video that I'm going to explore in this paper. So what is Glam Gore? It's a YouTube channel. It's been around for about 9 years and it has 3.92 million subscribers. It began primarily as a channel for special effects makeup, and in the 2 years or so before the pandemic, the channel hosted by Mikey branched out during the Halloween season to do something a little bit different. So Mikey is a makeup artist, and in 2019, the Halloween season saw Mikey bring her friends, so other YouTubers and her general buddies, to go ghost hunting, or as we'll see later, to go legend tripping. Come on, there we go. Oh, I've gone too far. There we are. So in this video, in this paper rather, it's the one where Mikey and her friend Spencer, who's sat in the middle, and her other friend Peter, who is the tech expert, stay in the Lizzie Borden house, or the B&B, the bed and breakfast, and try to contact the spirits of those murdered or those accused. In this YouTube video, there's a convergence of true crime, ghost hunting, old and new media, analog and digital. Mikey, who continues to claim she's a skeptic despite what she's seen, questions her eyes and ears as the night at the Borden house unfolds. But despite her stance as a skeptic, use of analog or old media combined with the new digital media, Mikey might very well have solved the 130-year-old case. Who killed Abby and Andrew Borden? So as said, Mikey, Spencer and Peter are all in the house and they want to find evidence of spirits there, and they use technology to do this. So the dead, or rather communicating with the dead through telecommunications, is as old as telecommunications. The telecommunications have always been associated with the occult. The electric telegraph brought with it long-distance communications, and this was likened to the communications with spirits. So according to Jeffrey Sconce, the transmissions of messages between intelligences at a distance both defined telecommunications and communicating with the dead. Even the methods of conveying the messages were similar. At seances, spirits tapped out messages, much like Morse code. And when Marconi developed the wireless radio, messages were transmitted through the air in radio waves, and it was thought that the dead could reside in and or communicate through these radio waves. So this brings us to the spirit box, a new gadget that Mikey brings along to the evening at the Borden house. The box scans the radio waves in search of spirits attempting to communicate, and this is known as radio voice phenomenon. It's not the same as EVP, which is electronic voice phenomenon, where you leave a tape running and pick up the messages after. Radio voice phenomenon, or RVP, happens in real time. It can be recorded if you're, as we see in the YouTube video, recording with another device, or if the spirit box you bought off Amazon isn't a piece of crap like Mikey's one and doesn't record even though it's supposed to. So just a 1-star review on that one. So before I get to what's picked up by the spirit box overnight and then examine through modern technology, I want to demonstrate how the Glam Gore Lizzie Borden video straddles multiple media forms or subgenres. So it's a ghost hunting video, and so as such follows the same codes and conventions of the established ghost hunting TV shows like Most Haunted, Ghost Hunters, etc. But it's also a YouTube video and contains all the now generally accepted codes and conventions of a piece of YouTube content, like the text appearing on the screen there. So the video starts like a televised ghost hunting show, with a teaser opening of what's to come. So in this case, we get a montage of shots of the axe, the sign outside the house, Mikey saying, "Oh my God," and looking wide-eyed, the replica of the skull, Spencer saying, "I'm done," and then lots of images of the night vision. And we have a voiceover of Mikey saying, "Dark energy is real," or "following us at this point." And then we're in a usual Glam Gore video with Mikey saying, "Hello, zombies." That's how she calls her subscribers. And the background jaunty music that we expect from all of Mikey's videos. And then we get the standard YouTube intros to like and subscribe. So as a ghost hunting TV series, then, Mikey and Spencer, so there they are, give the known facts about the case: who was there, who was killed, how they were killed, the trial, and why it's unsolved. So this is presented via a direct-to-camera address that we expect from YouTube. And then we get voiced over footage of the location where the past event took place, which is a convention of televised ghost hunting. Now, this method, according to Coven from 2007, is called legend tripping, where a trip is taken to a place of interest or a location or a building that has attached to it a legend. The legend, for the sake of good TV or good YouTube content, is grisly and commonly associated with a murder or a mysterious death. And then we get the attached tales of ghosts and apparitions. So Coven states, each new legend trip adds to the narrative core attached to the location by engaging with and replicating the legend itself. Much like graffiti, a truly terrifying encounter at a legend site ensures a kind of legendary immortality to the trippers. So indeed, what the Spirit Box says to Mikey and crew has itself become synonymous with Glam Gore content, with cult leader content, because Spencer hosts the Cult Leader podcast, and general chatter around Lizzie Borden across the internet. As we get to what the Spirit Box says, you might recognise the phrase if you've been looking at Lizzie Borden stuff, if you just happen to do that anyway. So anxiety and tension are built in the video as Mikey and the host acknowledge their crew, so in this case Peter behind the camera, and they even build in a false scare. Not intending to dupe the audience, but in post-production, they obviously decide that the footage that captures the ring light battery dying stays in the final uploaded video. So for a moment, all three of them are terrified, as you can see here, and Mikey and Spencer jump. So it's like the cat falling out of a cupboard in a horror movie. The battery and the light dies causes the video's first sort of, oh my God moment. So anyway, Mikey and company get down to trying to speak to a spirit in the Borden house. They start with the EMF reader, a device commonly used in ghost hunting, which measures fluctuations in electromagnetic fields, something that ghosts are supposed to be able to do. But in the Borden house, they have no luck with it, so they move on to the Spirit Box. Now, the Spirit Box scans through different radio stations, and you ask the spirit questions, and they use their energy to give you answers through the radio frequencies. They direct the words. So this is how Mikey understands the Spirit Box. In the now accepted YouTube style, Mikey tries the box, doesn't know what she's doing. So we get a test card from SpongeBob SquarePants, one eternity later. I'm sure you've seen that on many YouTube videos, where Mikey, I presume, Wikipedia's how the box works. Now, the voices and the words and the phrases are really hard to make out when you use a Spirit Box. If you use a Spirit Box, don't use a Spirit Box. And this is what Joe Banks has called Rorschach audio. He says the voices are equivalent of audio ink blots, that listening to RVP is more of a psychology experiment than a paranormal one. So we put in there what we think is there, or rather what we want to hear. So Mikey then is sat on the floor with Spencer, right where Abby Borden was axed to death. And all three of them take turns to ask the Spirit Box questions. So first, Spencer asks, Abby, was it John that killed you? The box scans, and I'll play you that in a minute, and then appears to say it was them. The audio is played back, slowed to 50%, and we're shown the waveforms from the digital technology that Peter uses, as you can see in the slide, and the text is overlaid to show us visually the audio of the video via the radio waves answering it was them. Very layered. So next, Spencer asks Abby, did John Moores kill you? The box scans and replies, she's the biggest threat. Here, the YouTube convention of the text appearing on the screen interprets the Spirit Box for us. This is what Mikey, Spencer, and Peter all claim to hear at the same time in the moment. But to impress on the viewer's mind that that's what it says, she is the biggest threat, the vernaculars of YouTube are used to exaggerate or confirm what the voice through the radio has said. Then Peter asks, Abby, did John kill you? And we get a slow creep in on the Spirit Box as it scans, and then a voice says, it was John. Now, YouTube conventions overlay punctuation here rather than text, so 2 exclamation points, as you can see, at the point where the voice appears to say, it was John. Are these exclamation points referring to the surprise and fear on hearing the box say it was John, or does it pertain more to how in this moment, Mikey, our host, doesn't immediately agree with Spencer and Peter that that's what the box said? So Mikey asks for a playback, as you can see there in the slide on the right. So here, the analogue or old media, the dead existing in the radio waves, gives ways to new media, or rather digital technology, the shiny MacBook that Peter has, and the complex audio software that prevents these visual waveforms. And this is needed to confirm to Mikey that it was John is what was heard, and to see visually the voices of the dead. So the Rorschach audio for Mikey is not as clear as it was for Spencer and Peter. So Peter isolates the recording. He was recording on a digital camera the whole time, and he replays the audio through the software on his Mac. The software shows the waveforms, as you can see on the slide there. And Mikey sort of is staring at this and thinking that she can see something else. So Peter says, we asked if John killed you, and presses play. Mikey looks interested but not convinced until she hears it again. So Peter and Spencer play It Was John over and over again, and she covers her mouth and she curls up, complains of being cold, she doesn't like it. For Spencer and Peter, it's as clear as day as that's what was heard. And the waveforms show visually the audio of the spirit box, the static in the scanning, and then most tellingly the dead space that you can see here, where the static drops out and a voice comes in. So it's in these waveforms, in the digital visualization of the supposed voice of Abby Borden telling us that it was John that killed her, that Mikey sees something. And it's the same audio signature that was detected on waveforms from a previous ghost hunt at Salem. I can explain that later in the chat. So Peter explains, this is dead space. Human speech looks alive and dead speech looks dead. There's nothing clearer than that. Now, more experienced ghost hunters or people who try to communicate with the dead through RVP break down the way the spirit box works by one of two ways. Either it's transformative, where the ghost manipulates the radio transmission to form their own words and phrases, or it's opportunistic. The ghost affects the spirit box in order to force it to select existing sounds to form words and phrases. So the first two communications that we have, it was them, she's the biggest threat, appear to be opportunistic. They sound like snippets of radio that already exist to get a message across. The third, it was John, does, to be fair, sound not quite of this world. It's an example of the spirit box working in the transformative state, the ghost manipulating the form of to form their own, and in this case, angry sounding words. But only when Mikey sees it on the waveform and sees the dead space does she even entertain that it might be Abby, and it might be Abby telling us, in fact, that it was John. Now, I'm going to play you a clip, and it's been recorded and layered many times, so it's quite difficult to hear. So you might want to turn up your computers when I press play, and then obviously turn me the hell down when I stop the clip. It's really short.
Play the question before it. I literally go, Abby, did John kill you?
Okay, turn it back down again. So we can clearly see disbelief from Mikey when only the old media is relied upon, and as a self-proclaimed skeptic, she's not sure that a crappy piece of plastic that doesn't even record can pick up voices of the dead. But when a voice is played back, and when it's given some visuals and the digital signature of the sound of dead space is clear to see, Mikey's skepticism starts to crumble. So adhering to the codes and conventions of ghost hunting TV, in the safe light of day the next morning, they all stay over at the Lizzie Borden house in that room where everything happens. Mikey and Spencer are more jokey and more relaxed, and they reflect on the evening's events. They repeat it was John to each other over and over again, and they have a laugh about the night before. So how can the subscribers trust Mikey? If we're to consider this short YouTube Halloween series from a makeup artist in the same game as long-standing ghost hunting TV, or even alongside paranormal experts, then we must consider the parasocial relationships that are built between YouTubers and their subscribers. Mikey, like many, approaches her channel as if talking to friends. Subscribers feel as if they know her, and therefore they trust her, and they trust that the audio has not been tampered with. And even with the trust in Mikey, Mikey does not trust her own ears or what the spirit box says. She needs the interpretation of what she can see to even start to believe what she heard. The old media isn't enough. So I put the link to the full episode in the chat if you want to watch it all. It is a really funny video, and that's it from me.
There we go. Brilliant. Thanks, Stella. Cracking start. Really enjoyed that. I have questions. Am I losing my voice now? Is this you three saying you've made me virtually poorly? I'm going to blame the conference if I go down and not my virus-infested 2-year-old. All right, next up, that was a great paper. We've got move straight on to our next one. We have Lindsay Nelson, is an associate professor in the Department of Political Science and Economics at Meiji University. Her research focuses on Japanese cinema and popular culture, especially Japanese horror films. And her work has been published in the Journal of Japanese and Korean Cinema, East Asian Journal of Popular Culture and Japanese Studies. And her first book, Circulating Fear, Japanese Horror, Fractured Realities and New Media, was published by Lexington Books in 2021. The paper is called Waking the Dead, Reshaping and Preserving Old Media in Fake Documentary. Very excited. Like I said, we had a great first paper, great panel. Hand over to Lindsay. If you need anything, give it a shout. I'll pop up on the screen, Lindsay, just to give you the 5-minute and 2-minute warnings. Other than that, I'll leave you to it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And again, thank you to Shelley and Laura for organizing this. So as you can see, the title of my paper today is Waking the Dead, Reshaping and Preserving Old Media in Fake Documentary Q. So just a quick outline here. Sorry, let me see. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to begin by talking a little bit about media archaeology, haunted media, and zombie media. And then the sci-fi analog paradox of contemporary Japan, the relationship between Japanese horror specifically and haunted media, and then the main focus of today's paper, which is the Japanese Fake Documentary Q YouTube channel, and then I will offer a few concluding thoughts. So in line with today's symposium themes and context, looking at the theoretical framework for this paper, it's very much grounded in the idea of media archaeology and remediation from Bolter and Grusin, from Jesse Parika's work, including What is Media Archaeology, and Wendy Chun and others discussing the concept of old versus new media, and of course the Dead Media project as well, from Bruce Sterling. So thinking about that, I was struck by something that Parika wrote, which is that media archaeology is a way to investigate new media cultures through insights from past new media, something that used to be new, often with an emphasis on the forgotten, the quirky, the non-obvious apparatuses, practices, and inventions. And in the midst of talk of dead media by such writers as Bruce Sterling, it was, sorry, I'm just going to move my panel here so that I can see better. Let's see. Okay. It was found that a lot of dead media were actually zombie media, living deads that found afterlife in new contexts, new hands, new screens, and new machines. And that's also from Parika. So let's see here. Okay, so that leads me to what I like to call the sci-fi analog paradox of contemporary Japan. So for anyone who hasn't really spent time in Japan, I feel like Japan is often presented as this sort of futuristic tech utopia where, you know, you have robot caregivers, you have bullet trains, you have talking toilet seats, and everybody says that, you know, downtown looks like Blade Runner, and it's this sort of sci-fi wonderland. Whereas if you've spent any time here, or if you've lived here for any length of time, you might realize that everyday life in Japan is still very strongly grounded in the analog, and that things that people take for granted in the US and Europe and the UK and maybe Australia and New Zealand are not necessarily a normal thing in Japan. Fax machines are still very much in use on a regular basis. Whenever you need to get any sort of paperwork done, you have to stamp it with an ink-on, a physical stamp. Thankfully, this changed a lot during the pandemic, but it's still the case in my university and a lot of other places. And there was an incident a couple of years ago where during a press conference, Japan's cybersecurity minister admitted that he had never used a computer in his professional life. So this is this sort of weird paradox that you have in Japan, where outwardly it is seen by a lot of people as this sort of tech wonderland, but day-to-day life is not so advanced in that way. And so if we think about J-horror, if we think about this specific group of Japanese horror films released from the late 1990s to the early 2000s that tended to have a lot of similar characters, plots, and directors and producers, I think we can say that most of these films had a relationship to both old and new media. If you think of The Ring, we have VHS cassettes. If you think of One Missed Call, you're dealing with cell phones. And then more recently, the sequels and spin-offs of these more famous J-horror films are much more concerned with newer media and streaming media, with smartphones, with YouTube, and with Nico Nico, which is the kind of Japanese version of YouTube. And they tend to, I think, in classic horror movie fashion, sort of feel kind of panicky about these technologies. So that leads me to Fake Documentary Q. So this is a Japanese YouTube channel that was created in August 2021 by a group of professional and amateur filmmakers and video editors. And a couple of them also created a much bigger and more popular Japanese YouTube channel called Zozozo, which is, I would say, a more traditional, like, ghost hunting, going to creepy places and filming it, documentary kind of YouTube channel. So the videos for Fake Documentary Q average between 200,000 and 500,000 views, which, you know, is small in the world of YouTube, but as Japanese YouTube channels go, it's pretty decent. And the films on the Fake Documentary Q channel, they're mostly just kind of mini films for between like 6 minutes and 20 minutes long, in the style of found footage and fake documentary horror. And I find it interesting that they're just generally a lot more subdued than other popular Japanese YouTube channels and videos. Japanese YouTube tends to really thrive on like prank videos and kind of over the top sort of antisocial behavior. These are the ones that are the most popular. And so Fake Documentary Q kind of stands out for that. And the videos are slick and well put together, and I think quite effective. So these videos very frequently depict dead media via the more interactive format of new media. So we have these videos that are depicting things like video cassettes and video stores and TV VCR combos, old phones, old old recorders, things like that. And just the videos themselves are often created with filters that make them look as if they were created on like an 8mm camera or something, or you know, a camcorder from the 80s or 90s. So I'll just show one example. This is a video called Strange Messages, which is one of their early videos. And in this video, we learned that the Fake Documentary Q team has received a letter from a woman and a collection of answering machine mini cassette tapes. And in the letter, the woman says, many years ago, I just got a series of very strange phone calls, all happening at the same time in the middle of the night. And I never was able to solve the mystery of what they meant or who they were. And so then basically the rest of the video is just footage of the messages on these tapes. So hopefully everybody can hear this. Let's just take a quick listen to this. Okay, so I think for me, what really stands out about that video is its use of noise. And in particular, just the noises and sounds that ground the video in a specific time and place. The sound of the kind of busy signal beeping, the answering machine beep, the robotic voice saying in Japanese, Saturday, 2:49 a.m. And the very squeaky kind of rewinding sound, and just the sort of garbled, staticky sound of the recording. I'm 46 years old, so I vividly remember these kinds of sounds being a part of my life at one point. And this makes me think of something that Parika has talked about, and that is noise as an intuitive part of technological culture. And so noise is not just incidental, it is a very big part of the technological experience. And Parika and others have argued basically for a less vision-centric history of media and new media, and just the idea that media is experienced not only with the eyes, but with the ears, with the nose, with the mouth, and that we can have a more embodied experience of media. So fake documentary Q videos frequently present and remix or remediate dead media in the much more interactive platform of YouTube, where commenters dissect the videos and replay them again and again. And of course, this is brilliant marketing wise, because if you're trying to get as many views as possible, create a video that people will want or need to replay multiple times. So for example, some of the comments on this Strange Messages video, one person said, the woman who sent the tape clearly has a Kansai accent. And message 21 to 26, the rattling sounds like bamboo. And then other comments are just about the kind of nostalgia that this dead media produces. One person says, not just the horror, I always love seeing lost technology like the mini cassette and the Iowa player. So this very specific brand of mini cassette player that you see in this video. And users, I think, are also effectively reshaping content by, for example, providing subtitles that the original videos did not. In one of the videos, it shows people putting a video cassette into a TV VCR, and a bunch of text in Russian comes up on the screen, and there's also Russian voiceover in the video that we see within the video that is not subtitled, and the people watching it within the video do not understand it. But of course, because this is YouTube, someone provided English subtitles, English translation, as well as Japanese translation as well. So I think that definitely kind of changes the shape and the experience of watching the video. So with that in mind, in talking about waking the dead, I feel like basically fake documentary Q is taking old media objects and experiences like this mini cassette and sort of putting them through the YouTube or new media filtration machine and producing something new, producing this remediated version of what originally existed perhaps in the old media device. So I think we can say that, of course, new media remediates old media. And as Parika has said, some old media are actually zombie media, living deads that found an afterlife in new contexts, new hands, new screens, and machines. And I think that a lot of these old media objects are finding new life within these fake documentary Q videos. And Chun has argued that new media represent a convergence of computation and media storage. So in this sense, we could say that fake documentary Q and its community are both reimagining and preserving media in a new way. All right, that's all I have for today. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lindsay. I can tell you from the chat, you've terrified everyone with that clip. Early here, I'm halfway through my morning coffee and I'm done for the day. That's me completely spooked. It was amazing, fascinating paper. Thank you very much. Okay. So some fantastic connections there between the first two papers. I'm eager to hear what people are thinking. But we have, last but not least, Matteo Polato to do his paper. I think he's on there. Oh, yeah, there it is. Hi, Matteo. Matteo is a researcher, creator, and sound artist. He is currently a PhD candidate at Manchester University, researching on the roles of sound, vibration, and resonance-based processes in contemporary culture and paranormal practices. His background is in media studies, sound studies, and sonic arts. And among his research interests is the connection between gaming culture and online culture. Recently, he co-founded the Dark Arts Research Collective at MMU School of Arts, a group of academics and artists which explored the creative, communal, and boundary-breaking potential of cultural practices. Mateo's paper today is called A One-Way Route to Lavendertown, Glitch, Noise and Haunting in Pokemon's Urban Legends. So pass over to you, Matteo. Any questions, let me know. I'll pop up when you have 5 minutes left, okay?
Hello, can you hear and see everything? Oh, no, wait. Okay, hello everybody, thank you. So this presentation is really just the beginning of a research on creepypastas and urban legends connected to Pokemon video games. As a case study, which is representative to me of recent forms of online, so to say, open source horror storytelling based on old video games. Something that online communities usually call nowadays digital horror, to kind of distinguish such stories from the analog horror of web series such as Local 58, the Mandala Catalog, Monument Mythos, and so on. So in my analysis, I aim to trace processes between hardware and software, and specific like apocryphal interactions that are possible within the games, in particular relatively to programming glitches, to highlight their foundational role in the emergence of some of the most famous and long-lasting creepypastas and urban legends on the internet. So Pokemon does not need any introduction. Japanese transmedia franchise began in 1996 with the release of Pokemon Red and Green on Nintendo Game Boy, and becoming one of the, or according to certain sources, the highest grossing franchise of all time. So immensely popular. It always had like a children target. It's generally characterized by a light-hearted, cheerful, happy atmosphere. But however, Pokemon is at the center of countless horror, urban legends, and stories online. Actually, it is probably one of the main sources for gaming creepypastas, in which the happy atmosphere of the original games overturned to become uncanny, presenting a bestiary of hauntings emerging from the not-so-innocent video game that can curse the young players and lead into tragic endings. Creepypastas connected to Pokemon, as well as to other old video games, are widely researched in recent years, usually with a strong focus on the nostalgic aspect of old media, such as the Game Boy, that is reversed into the horrific by such forms of storytelling. So this corruption of nostalgia is usually considered as fundamentally a narrative device to express the ontological return of traumatic pasts, used to investigate themes such as childhood trauma, anxiety of adulthood, and other psychological conditions. And while nostalgia is certainly a fundamental aspect of this form of storytelling, what I argue is that this approach, which is many times very focused on the aesthetics of these games, while providing great insights on the matter, of course, sometimes tend to kind of overlook a bit the interactive and relational processes, which are constitutive of all mediation, but of video games in particular. And also about the material and discursive specificities of such old media, beyond mere visual imageries, and then their intrinsic potential to trigger meaning, imagination, and story. So therefore, I propose an approach to the analysis of creepypastas and urban legends, which traces interaction and the construction of agency through the particular affordances that the specific mediums allows. So just to give a bit of context, my approach is adapted by agential realism and a bit of actor network theory. And in this sense, I focus on the construction of agency through interaction as fundamental in the emergence of these horror stories, in particular when certain modes of interactions on the media confuse and unsettle a clear definition of agency, leading to what Fisher calls the sensation of the eerie. So as said, Pokemon is at the center of hundreds of creepypastas and urban legends online, usually presented in the form of news or investigative reports involving death and suicides of young players due to alleged psychophysical effects of the game itself. And there's many different versions of it, but of the stories, but there's always like a supernatural element to them, where the game cartridge itself is cursed and haunted by the spirits of dead players, which can drive every new player to madness and to their death, or even worse. Among the many that surely many of you already know, I would like to focus on a slightly more niche one, which I think is representative. And it's also interesting because it's composed of a kind of multimedia representation that involves text, images, very credible imageries, and also other audiovisual material. So this is called misfortune.gb. And according to this urban legend, specific actions performed in the game by the player, usually by chance, are able to catapult the player in another secret game present in the Pokemon's game memory itself, but normally not accessible. Here, the player finds themselves in a different, mysterious environment, and they're welcomed by a demonic entity claiming to exist within the very fabric of reality. This is going to be important later. Sorry. And the player is then challenged to solve a series of difficult and very obscure puzzles, and if they lose, misfortune will fall upon the player's loved ones. So, in this story, in this legend, the nostalgic and retro imagery certainly contributes to the immersion and the credibility of the story, as well as its uncanny atmosphere. But in my view, this is almost secondary, because in general, urban legends about Pokemon are stories of interaction, are stories about where the haunting emerges from the subversion of the normal affordances of the Game Boy and of the Pokemon games themselves. So what I aim to do here is to analyze the origin of sub-urban legends by tracing not so much the imagery as the visual aesthetics, but rather the playing, and in particular, any potential wrong of subversive ways of playing with the game. And indeed, if we follow the modes of interaction similar to those depicted in the urban legends, we discover that the original Pokemon games, released in 1996, from the very beginning have been infamous for the countless glitches and bugs that affected them. And again, from the release, players began to stumble upon such glitches, as first by chance, but then starting to research the properties and to exploit them as cheats to gain extra power in the game, but also to share them just for the mysterious and unsettling connotation that they would bring. And I'm sure that any millennial here in the conference that grew up with Pokemon like me can remember the kind of slight uncanny sensation in learning about the Mew glitch, or the Island of Numbers, or Missing No, or the Kokashira doors, and so on. Things that have nothing supernatural in themselves, of course, but they always felt like they should not exist in a game like Pokemon. So again, bring this question of agency is the source of the sensation of the eerie. And so these are all glitches that spread globally way before social media, first through word of mouth among children, then through specialized magazines, and then through forums of the early YouTube, and they continue to today through like a very active community of hackers and speedrunners that research these glitches. The most famous and most relevant potentially is what is usually called the glitch cities. So the player can perform certain frame-perfect actions in the game and go what is called like out of bounds. So meaning to be able to walk beyond the boundaries allowed by the map of the game. So what happens here is that this produces a memory overflow glitch. So the Game Boy tries to retrieve the map data from wrong areas of the cartridge ROM memory, thus misreading as environment assets, data such as the player's name, Pokemon IDs, save data, and so on. So we see this kind of scrambled environment made of tiles, pixels, and numbers, which is actually an actual visual representation of the game's internal data. So indeed is the fabric of the game's reality that the demon misfortune was mentioning that becomes visible. And this is an opening to actually a liminal space where the game world and the underlying programming code kind of merge together, become accessible. And so not only is it possible to see a kind of correspondence in the visuals between the glitch cities and some of the urban legends, we have like Misfortune again, the one below, but what happens is actually a deterritorialization of the very affordances of the game, the possibility of ways of interacting with the game space. Another similar glitch got very, very popular, the so-called glitchmons. So this happens through like a similar process. So when the game tries to load Pokemon data and the sprites, the images of the games from wrong memory locations, so what happens is instead of the normal Pokemon to catch, the player is confronted with scrambled pixels that sometimes corrupt the HUD of the game. Sometimes the glitchmon takes over completely the screen, and usually it's accompanied by creepy, distorted sounds. And in most of the creepypastas and urban legends, they tell about the encounter with corrupted entities which should not exist and the wrong agency. And in the case of glitchmon, it can be seen how this triggers a sense of the eerie kind of sensation of haunting. Also interesting to note that the interaction with glitchmons can even corrupt the save file because of their like unstable nature, erased in the game. So indeed occurs. So to summarize, glitches have transformative power on the game, and at the same time also about the meaning of the game. And Newman says that through the glitch, the game is refigured as a living, dynamic, malleable entity revealing new secrets as it is continually probed, investigated, and played. And this brings to another fundamental aspect, which is, I think, the link between the glitch and the urban legend, which is the fact that both of them are fundamentally collective facts. They emerge, they develop, and they grow through circulation, through sharing, and through collective processes. And I argue it is from such cultural feedbacks of glitches and the resemantization of playing that myth and a digital folklore emerge, and the game gets connoted with horror stories. So I have one last example that I think is representative of such processes. Sorry. It's a glitch commonly called the Ghost of Glitch City. It has been discovered fairly recently in 2016, I believe, which also demonstrates how the original Pokemon games have never really been that media, and instead how they continue to expand the lore through almost hyperstitional or synchronistical findings, getting cultural here. So this is Pokemon Crystal, which is the second generation of games released on Game Boy Color in 1999. It is possible to go out of bounds very early in the game or reach a glitch city, which is very similar to many others that have been already discovered and studied. But here, however, there is a weird consistency, an internal coherence, and almost a meaningfulness that charge the interaction with eeriness and the sense of the uncanny. So it is a sprite of a young girl that you can see there in the images, that for some reason is the only element in the game in black and white. And once the player is near enough, the girl approaches the player, a dialog box appears with glitched text and scrambled pixels. Sometimes it covers the whole screen with, in a stereotypically horror move, a repetition of the name of the player over and over again, taken from somewhere in the memory. And then the game crashes. So it is said that she can erase the same file again. And someone says, I'm not sure about that, but someone says that it can even corrupt irreversibly the cartridge, so making it impossible to play the game. But it doesn't end here, because when their interaction begins, a specific track of the music of the game is triggered, and this is the soundtrack of the burned tower level, which is an area which is actually like a tower burned to the ground due to a thunder. And on that level, it has been discovered that should have been an NPC, like a non-playable character, which was then cut from the final release, but was cut content has been retrieved through data mining. And it should have been an old man just outside the tower with a dialogue option that reads, oh no, my daughter is missing. No, she couldn't have gone to the burn tower. I told her not to go near it. People seem to disappear there. Oh, what should I do? So fans began to speculate, went completely crazy, and speculate that the girl in the glitch city is actually the ghost of a quest cut from the game, a girl lost in the burn tower and never allowed to be saved by the player, that re-emerges as destructive revenant in the form of glitch. Not so different from other vengeful ghosts living in haunted media such as Ringu Sadako that we mentioned earlier. So, in conclusion, this is first exploration of the field. There was an attempt at, so to say, a bit like generationally, I don't know, to reclaiming haunting from the overarching discursive power of ontology, and to recognize the unique auras of media and the specific affective intensities they can provide. So when seen from the point of view of interaction with the game and with the materiality of the software processes, the horror stories and urban legends on Pokémon become part of a continuum, an ongoing, organic, and dynamic feedback between ways of playing, the transformation and interactive affordances of old media, and the continuous resemantization of the discursive and material boundaries of the game. So what emerges from this network is a subculture that from 1996 until today continues to expand the meaning and the imagination of Pokémon, producing stories, creativity, and a folklore in the making from a medium that refuses to die and instead haunts, curses, and terrifies entire generations of Pokemon trainers. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Matteo. And Matteo, that was really great. That the burn tower is now, again, another thing that is very creepy. I'm getting a lot of material for Nightmare Fuel. As we finish the panel, I'll start. I have a few questions. I have questions first. all three of you. So I'll start with Stella and work down. So I thought it was really interesting that the Glam Gore, that's the right way around, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not Gore and Glam. Yeah. Right. You said it's kind of like these videos are offshoots, right? Like they're not the typical thing that they do on the channel. So I was kind of wondering from like I guess an audience perspective, are they popular additions to the channel? Do you think, like, you know, for your own kind of looking, that they draw in other audiences as opposed to her kind of dedicated following? And do we do a lot of them? Are there something that kind of pop up a lot or have popped up more frequently?
Yeah, so if you open up Glam Gore's YouTube sort of homepage, and the YouTube is generally arranged videos via playlists and things like that. If you click on videos, then you see the videos that she's made in sort of chronological order. But if you look on the playlists, all of the ghost hunting ones are at the top. And she started it with, I think, in 2018. So she's a makeup artist, and she specializes in special effects and prosthetics and stuff. And one of her jobs used to be putting makeup on the actors who were wandering around existing haunted buildings for like Halloween events in America, in LA. And then she started going to supposedly haunted places and putting her special effects makeup on there and sort of telling the story of the place. And then that evolved into her putting her special effects makeup on in haunted places and seeing if she could see some ghosts as well. And as these series went on, it just sort of moved away from the makeup. So by the time we get to 2018, 2019 Halloween season, she's just going ghost hunting, and she's bringing friends with her. And the makeup's kind of gone from that point, but she's, you know, still calling herself Glam Gore. And unfortunately, Mikey had an accident. She fell over in a shower and smashed her head, and she disappeared off YouTube for about 2 years. And all of that time that she was off YouTube, her ghost hunting series, she said when she came back, "Thank you all so much for engaging with the ghost hunting series, because that's been keeping me alive. It's been paying my bills, because everyone was carrying on watching the ghost hunting stuff." And it's kind of really ran with it. And it was Mikey's channel where she first mentioned Spencer, that he had a podcast, and then everyone went over to watch his podcast, and now he's doing fantastically well, could give up his day job. And you know, all because this, you know, one night in the Lizzie boarding house, they had found an audio recording of Abby going, "It was John," over and over and over again. So it's done fantastically well for the channel, and she's been able to maintain her position as a successful YouTuber despite having two and a half years out because of a head injury.
Yeah, wow, yeah. So yeah, like immensely popular as well. Yeah, I mean, I can't believe that was the least creepy voice thing that we've got. Like, you know, but that was still pretty bleak. Kate's got a question for Stella again. Sorry, Stella, you're under the spotlight here. I can ask it. Does Mikey tend to include the same friends, or does it vary greatly, both in terms of gender and their reactions to the recordings?
She has a pool of friends that she kind of picks from for her videos. So over the 2 seasons where it was 2 sets of series in the Halloween seasons where it's all about the ghost hunting, Peter was always there because he's the tech guy. He's her tech guy anyway. And then sometimes his brother was there. Sometimes Spencer was there. Sometimes her best mate's there, who's always drinking wine and getting shit-faced at the same time, which is great. And then sometimes her friend, another guy who was another YouTuber, who I think they ended up in a relationship with afterwards. So there's a lot of rotating panel of friends that come in and out of the videos, because they fly all around America doing this. And it varies in terms of who believes what and how much they believe. So Spencer has said from the start, "I believe in ghosts. This is all true. We're going to change your mind as a skeptic." Katie, the one who's always getting drunk, tends to stay out of it because she's, I don't know, I think she's scared. Maybe that's why she's getting drunk. But so it varies in terms of who believes and who's had their mind changed, and had their mind changed about what by the end. But Mikey does maintain that I'm a skeptic, even though you can see in that short clip that she's, you know, she is bricking it by the end, and then sleeps in that room. So yeah, it varies who she brings with her, but it is a range of friends, and that gives that sort of the sense of authenticity that we expect from a YouTube video, that we are just sitting in with friends, or that we know the YouTube with the parasocial relationship, because Mikey talks to camera and addresses us in the same way that she talks to her friends that are in the room, and that helps us to kind of go along with what's happening or believe it, or, you know. And yeah, it was John.
Excellent, thank you. So we've got a few questions now. Tom has got a question for Matteo. It says, you've mentioned glitch occurring in the Pokemon games for reasons of memory overload or the computer pulling information from other files / areas of the game cartridge. Is this similar to the quite aptly titled kill screens on older arcade machines?
Thank you for the question. I actually had to Google kill screens in arcade machines but yeah, I think it's similar. I think so I don't know enough to be like exhaustive about this, but in the case of very kind of limited system with a very limited computational power, like the Game Boy, like maybe the arcade machines, it's very easy to kind of like the software leaves openings for kind of like peeking into the underlying systems, and so it's very easy that for some sequence of actions kind of like create this wrong readings of the internal memory. And yeah, I think it's similar. I'm not sure it's very related, but it's interesting, the connection with arcade machines, because I don't know if you're aware of Mew, which is the secret 151st Pokemon on the first generation. There was one of the biggest first like secrets about the Pokemon games, and it was the developers wanted it as a reminder of, like, as a memory of the urban legends about arcade machines. So there was already in the 70s and the 80s the idea that certain actions in the arcade machines could have like a certain specific behaviors, and they wanted to have that kind of like feeling in the Pokemon games. So there's a very, very early constitutive connection with this kind of like urban legend in the Pokemon game. Yeah.
I was nodding along sagely there and forgot to unmute myself. But yeah, bro, thanks, Matteo. Yeah, that's really good. I remember Mew. That Pokemon, the first movie was, again, as a millennial, a huge cultural event for 8-year-old Kieran. Okay, question for the chair to ask. Again, I reckon everyone's in the pajamas here, guys. I think that's what it is. I think it's, but this one, they've said kind of came up from Matteo, but they want Lindsay's input too. So if it's okay, we could start with Lindsay and then go back to Matteo for that one, just switch it around a bit. Thank you, Connor. So is there a recurring image of hands in Japanese media? One of the glitches was called white hand, and I sometimes see antagonistic and creepy pale hands in Japanese games, and sometimes they're even coming out of toilets, like in The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. Some kind of yokai, maybe?
You know, off the top of my head, I cannot think of any yokai that are specifically disembodied hands, but I could just be totally wrong. If there may be other people who have better knowledge of the yokai encyclopedia than I do, there might be one. I do think that when it comes to just Japanese monsters and ghosts and folklore, there are a lot of just disembodied body parts that kind of hop around and scare people. Their legs, their heads, their teeth. So I wouldn't be surprised if there were also some hands in there. I think also, yeah, just pale skin is certainly something that you see in a lot of Japanese ghost stories and folklore. So it makes sense that, you know, pale hands kind of coming out would also be part of that.
Excellent. Matteo, anything to talk about?
Yeah, it's a really great question. In my knowledge of I mean, I'm a huge fan of like kaidan and Japanese horror folklore, and I think, I don't know, like I always thought about the recurrence of feet and footsteps. What's the name of that the Peony Lantern story? One of the most famous. It's all about like the feeling and the sensation and the sound of footsteps and the changes from when the protagonist realizes that what he's hearing is a footstep of ghost. They change their onomatopoeia. I don't know, maybe there's certainly something about like specific body parts creating specific feelings, and then maybe, I don't know, hands are related to touch. I think Japanese ghost lore is very it's quite non-visual, so maybe the idea of like again, it's kind of like more like embodied dimension of like the feeling of haunting might be something.
Great, thank you both. That was a really good question and two fascinating answers as well. Okay, so I have a question for Lindsay. Really interested in the viewer comments you discussed. Me too, actually. That was a question I had written down as well. Is there a suggestion that engaging with the obsolete formats and hardware is just as, or more sometimes, important for Pit Documentary Q's audience as the content itself? Does the object matter more than the story and the effect?
Yeah, great question. I think that I would say that the Fake Documentary Q audience is probably divided up into people who, you know, are here for the horror, and then there are people who are here because they're kind of old media otaku. And, you know, within the sort of otaku community within Japan, there are people who are really into trains. There are people who are really into cassette tapes, and there are people who are just really into old media specifically. And so I think just kind of perusing the comments, you can definitely see a good chunk of them are related to, you know, the brand and make of the object that's being used. And one of the directors of FTQ said in an interview, you know, they were asked, how do you find all of these super old objects, you know, to use in your videos? And he was kind of vague in his answer, but he basically said, yeah, one of our guys is just really good. Like he knows where to go to get these really old, you know, answering machines and TV VCR combos and stuff like that. So yeah, I think there's, for some people, it is definitely about fetishizing the old object. And that's, in the last 20 years in Japan, there's been what they kind of call a Showa boom or retro boom of, you know, there are these cafes and kind of pop-up shops where you can go and play Pac-Man on an old like arcade game console, and you can, you know, answer calls with a rotary phone, which is so exciting, I guess, to people who never did that before. So yeah, I think nostalgia for old media is a big part of the appeal of FTQ for a lot of people.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, isn't it? How the audiences in all three of your cases, it's kind of the questions I had kind of was about, you know, the fact that, and you've already kind of covered it, how audiences get to these things, right? Like, is it interested in the makeup to start with, and then suddenly they're watching a video about Lizzie Borden? Is it someone interested in a specific type of answering machine? Is it someone who's just a Pokemon fan who suddenly finds himself engaged in deep horror lore, or just trying to see why the game's knackered? It's kind of interesting about how that kind of intersection happens, and something I kind of had across all of your papers. So my question, basically, to Matteo to start with, has this kind of intersection, because obviously as Pokemon as a brand that is, as you say, primarily focused at kids, certainly not the only audience, but is the target, has this kind of intersection with these kinds of creepypasta, horror style things been acknowledged in any official sense? Has there ever been a leaning towards it, or has it always been something that is completely on the kind of fringes of the fandom of Pokemon? Has there ever been kind of any intersection with the officialness of the brand itself?
Kind of, yes, every now and then. Well, like, they're not very, they don't seem to have like a great sense of humor sometimes at Game Freak, and sometimes they can be like, in the case of Missing No Glitch, is like this one of the most famous glitch Pokemon. The developers had to go like, no, this is not an actual part of the game, because the lore was so big around the Pokemon that it was considered an actual Pokemon, like as a deliberately put by the developers. They had to like, no, this is not part of it. And this happened quite a few times, about like, no, the music of Lavendertown is not causing like mass suicides and so on. At the same time, though, in particular with Pokemon Go, that I don't know enough, but when they did like the Halloween specials and stuff, sometimes they play with the stories. So definitely there is some sort of like, yeah. And also I think I think they're very well aware that it's like free marketing for them and free advertising.
Yeah,
and very huge, but it is a big part of the franchise right now, of course. So
yeah, it's just
maybe
fascinating, a tricky balance, isn't it, to kind of acknowledge it as part of something that gets people in while also trying to maintain the kind of brand essence of it, not horrifying young children. But the Halloween things, the Pokemon Go and things like that, is really interesting.
Yeah, and also I also think that they are aware that they continue to make games for kids, but they know that the older generations kind of remains attached to Pokemon somehow, and so they I think they're trying to cover all the
that's really interesting, kind of growing up with the original fans itself. Yeah, a question from Dylan for me to ask. As far as you know, when did this Pokemon creepypastas kind of start? Was it concurrent with the creepypastas in general? Were there specific time periods where it became less on or popular? I guess that's a good little follow-up.
A question for me. Yeah. So the first recognized is called Come Follow Me, which was the first creepypasta that mentioned Lavendertown and the music of Lavendertown. It was from 2010. It's very difficult though to trace back the origins of the things. It was one of the points of my presentation that. Okay, this is like maybe like autoethnographical, but I remember when I was a kid, there were stories about strange things that could happen in Pokemon, and that was inspired me to research on this. So, also certain that the first creepypastas already mentioned specific glitches and other lore stories in the in this Come Follow Me creepypasta, which is like recognized as the first one. There is mention, we say like, oh, this happened, but no, it wasn't missing. No, it wasn't this. It was something else. So there was already a sort of like knowledge, like shared knowledge about strange lore around Pokemon. So I think it goes. I think most of the creepypastas are born around those years, like the early 2010s, and but I think definitely there is again like a continuum that starts from the very early, almost at the beginning of the Pokemon franchise.
Thanks, Matteo. Okay, so there's no question in the chat. So so that's final bit of housekeeping I have. Stella, you mentioned Salem and said pick me up on that in the chat later, and I'm going to pick you up now, if that's all right. So I was just wondering, if you could just expand on that point as a kind of aside to the paper, and then we can wrap up in a few minutes.
Well, what happened in Salem? So it was part of the Halloween series. They went to Salem, they went to Lizzie Borden house, and they went to the Chateau Marmont Hotel in LA, which is supposedly haunted by many ghosts, many of them celebrities. So they went to Salem, obviously Salem witch trials, we all know, Salem witch trials, Salem mass murder of women, let's call it how it is. And they're in a hotel in Salem, and they're using the EMF meter, and they go downstairs. It's like a ballroom, it's like conference room in the basement of the hotel. They're sat there. They're just recording some 360 video. They didn't mean to be catching a ghost, and they've got the EMF meter on the table. The EMF meter starts going crazy. There's a curtain behind them that moves, and then Peter's recording it on a digital camera, and he has his iPhone on the table in front of him. They've got like 4 cameras set up, so they keep showing it from all angles. The EMF's going wild. Peter's phone on the table that he's not touching starts recording on its own. And when they play back the audio that they recorded from this like 10-15 minutes down in this basement, the EMF's kicking off, and they look at the waveforms that I showed on my slides, those orange waveforms. When the EMF meter is hitting the high colors on it, it's dropping out on so it's looking like the dead space on the waveforms, but they couldn't hear anything, but the EMF is picking it up, and it does look very odd. And when we've looked at, like, I know with Beth and Jones has looked at like forensic fandom stuff, so has Matt Hills in the past. If you look at the comment section on that Salem video, where people have played those audio bits where the EMF is going wild, and we can see it on the waveforms, people are saying if you slow it down and you listen closely, you can hear something in this like beeping, glitching noise. You can hear a voice saying Sarah, and Sarah Good is a known witch woman who was murdered in Salem. So they show the video as they heard it that night, and then they sort of in post-production overlay all these waveforms and overlay all the audio glitches, and all the fans are saying you can hear it saying Sarah. It's Sarah must be speaking to us through the EMF and through the waveform. So it's all there, and the Salem one is probably creepier than the Lizzie Borden one. But you know, if you Google Lizzie Borden then it doesn't take many hits for you to find somebody going, "It was John."
Yeah.
Just become that internet sort of law now that it was John, and most people do think it was John anyway, and that Lizzie was wrongly accused. But yeah, the Salem video is also good. If you go to the Glam Gore video channel, you'll see they're all there. They're very good.
Bro, I'm having that. I'll be watching some of them. That's great. Thank you guys. So yeah, I mean, we are spot on for time. So thank you so much to the panelists individually, fantastic papers, but also some really great kind of connective tissue that hung in all of them. And thank you to everyone who had a question. Really enjoyed that. Thank you very much. I'll now pass over to Shelley and Laura.
Thanks ever so much. Thanks ever so much for great chairing, Kieran, and thank you so much to Stell and Lindsay and Matteo for some really interesting papers.